Hello and welcome to episode 4 of Christian's Political Talks. I am your host, Christian, and today our special guest is the co-founder, principal and director of Meld Studios and the national vice president for the Australian Democrats. Now, he is also the Australian Democrats No.1 candidate for the Senate seats of New South Wales for the 2022 federal election, Mr. Steve Baty. How are you today?
I'm very well, Christian. Thanks for having me.
No worries. So we have apologies from the Australian Democrats No.2 candidate, Miss Suzanne Rogers, and also another apology from the No.3 candidate for the Senate, Mr. Craig Richards, who couldn't make it today due to prior arrangements.
Yeah, Suzanne and Craig are out and about, I'm afraid.
That's all right. So why don't we start off by you telling us a bit about yourself?
Thanks, Christian. So I'm a small business owner. I run a strategic design firm that was founded in Sydney, but is based around the country. Currently employ about 38 people, and we've been in operation for about 12 and a half years. Strategic design is an area where we act a lot like consultants. We come in, we work with organisations, we help them understand who their customers are, the needs of their staff. We dig into the problems that they might be having with the service that they deliver, that kind of thing. Help them make strategic decisions, set direction, redesign the services that they offer, that kind of thing. We work in some really diverse areas. So we do work in education, in public transport, in finance, superannuation, education, health, a whole range of stuff. But that company has been running for just over 12 years, 12 and a bit years. It was founded by myself and two others. And as I say, we we have a team of about 38 at the moment. At least tomorrow it will be when two new staff come online. I also have a second business. I run a conference business as a second small business that has a team of 4 of us. And we organise and host a series of conferences through the year. In 2022, we'll be hosting 6 events. Yeah, I'm also a husband, a father. I have 4 kids. They're at various stages of high school. The eldest has just started university this year at the Australian National University. It's my stepson Gus. My stepson Eli is in TAFE, like a school-based apprenticeship type of arrangement. The youngest 2 have just started high school.
Well, so owning 2 small businesses yourself, I take it you'll be an active supporter for small businesses around Australia?
Yeah, absolutely. Small businesses, like one of the most sort of vibrant parts of the Australian community and the Australian economy. If you look at any small town, any regional centre, you walk down the main street of your local shopping mall or your local sort of, shopping district, it'll be full of small businesses. At least the good ones are. The more vibrant ones have, like just small family-run small businesses are a really vibrant part of what we do as a country.
Yeah, yes, for sure. Small businesses. I prefer small businesses over large businesses. I prefer giving my money to small businesses. I have friends that run small businesses too. So I have a favourite agenda for small businesses. So why did you join the Australian Democrats Party?
So the Australian Democrats were always my party of choice. When I was younger, when I was a younger voter, I always voted for the Democrats in the upper house. I never had an Australian Democrat that I, sort of recall in the lower house. And I've spent most of my time in places like Fowler in Western Sydney. So I grew up in Fairfield. At the moment, the local member in that area is Chris Bowen from the Labor Party. Next door to that is the seat of Fowler, which is where Christina Kennelly is trying to get a seat in the lower house this election.
Yes.
And then I moved into the inner west of Sydney. So I've spent the last 30 years living in, places like Annandale and Leichhardt and Rozelle, which is all Grangler. It's Anthony Albanese's territory. It's only in the last few months that I've found myself living in a non-Labor seat. I'm now in the seat of Reid. But in the upper house, it's always for me been the Australian Democrats. And it resonates with me in terms of the way I simply navigate the world, which is a strong eye on the evidence, a strong eye on the science, listen to experts, understand their advice, recognise that experts aren't always well connected with the real world. And so balancing that by talking to the people who will be impacted by policy decisions that are being made. In my working life, a lot of my time is spent closing the gap between the decision makers who might sit in a corporate office somewhere or in a boardroom somewhere, and the people who will be affected by those decisions, their customers, their service recipients, their staff even. The Australian Democrats, when we look at sort of how we go about creating policy, it's exactly the same model. So we go and talk to scientists, we go and look at the data that they publish, the reports that they release, like that kind of thing. But it's balanced with what will the impact of those ideas and that thinking be on small communities, on regional Australia, on farmers, on small businesses, on single parents or whoever it might be, and go, well, okay, where's a sensible balance in terms of that kind of that policy area.
Yeah, so is there any Australian Democrats in the lower house this election?
We've got a few candidates running in the lower house. In New South Wales, we have a candidate, Greg Butler, running in the seat of Eden Monaro. I think now that nominations are closed, Greg will be the only one. That's going to be a really interesting election. As you might know, Eden Monaro is a very funny seat. It'll get a lot of attention on the night from Anthony Green as he's going through looking at swings and margins and who might win. But Greg will be a great local representative if he can get up on the night.
Well, yes, I have definitely heard of Eden Monaro. There was a by-election recently a couple of years ago in that seat. Right. And yep. I believe, yes, it's a marginal Labor seat at the moment. It's currently held by Labor. And they have 10 candidates at the moment, which, yes, Greg Butler is one of the candidates for running for the Australian Democrats.
Yeah.
So how did you end up being on the No.1 ticket for the New South Wales Senate?
So I joined the Democrats a couple of years ago, and I was frustrated by what was happening with our politics. We've had 9 years, or at that time 7 years, of the Liberal National Coalition, and they're awful by any objective measure of politics and policy making. Good governance, good foreign affairs, good international relations, good economic management. I mean, it doesn't really matter which lens you view them through. They're just not very good at government. Like they're not. They talk a big game, but they really do fail to deliver. And I was becoming increasingly frustrated, in particular with the lack of action on climate change, but just this general intellectual dishonesty that is diffuse through the Liberal National Coalition. The idea that you can just reject science, you can ignore scientists, the idea of intellectual elites and this kind of thing, basically making a lionizing the idea that it's okay to remain ignorant about issues and it's okay to act on that ignorance as though that's a valid course of action. And it was really depressing. And it came with a real small-mindedness and mean-spiritedness in how they allocated funding, the way in which they viewed the unemployed people, homeless people, the aged, sick, students, like everyone was viewed through this lens of, if you don't have anything today, we're certainly not going to help you get anything in the future. With that frustration, I was looking to become more politically active. I saw that the Democrats existed and I joined. So like I came at it from the point of view of, I want to do something. It wasn't just, yeah, look, I'll get on board and, donate some money kind of thing. I wanted to be active. I very quickly got involved in policy. So I was the principal author of our sustainable agriculture policy. I've worked on our economic policy, our climate change policy, accountability, housing, defence. I've been engaged in all of those. So I'm aware of, and I'm involved in, from a research point of view, from a what actions do we want to take point of view, quite a lot of the policy that the party has been putting forward over the last 18 months or so. When nominations were being looked at earlier this year, I decided to put my hand up as a candidate. That nomination was looked on quite favourably within the assessment process, and ultimately I was assigned the #1 ticket for the Senate in New South Wales, and I couldn't be prouder of that.
Well, yes, congratulations. It's definitely an achievement to get on the Senate ticket.
Thank you.
Yes, well, who knows, maybe one day I might end up on a ticket myself. Who knows
Indeed.
where life leads. But yeah,
well, we want interested people to stand up, and I think I'm not a politician, and I actually think in the context of standing for the Senate, that's actually a good thing. I think in the context of standing for the lower house, I think that's a good thing. I saw like your first couple of episodes of the podcast where you spoke with a couple of the candidates for Lindsay.
yes.
One from the Labor Party, one from the Greens, and it was great to see people who are ordinary, like a fireman, a teacher, a tradie, people who, once belonged to a union, started a family, are kind of active in their community, but aren't political operatives. They didn't study political science and become an advisor and get a job and sort of climb this political ladder, and now they're standing for government. They're ordinary people. I think that's an awesome thing for our parliament. I think it's a great way for a representative democracy to operate. So do it.
Yes, well, I hope to achieve my dream of becoming a primary teacher soon, and hopefully maybe when I'm a bit older and have more experience in life.
That's a tough gig, Christian. Teaching primary school kids is a tough gig. My hat is off to you.
Yes, it has its challenges. Yeah, that's definitely for sure. So as we mentioned before, well, you were talking about your policies, like the Australian Democrat policies. So what would be your main policies that you would help pass through if you got into the Senate?
So a lot of what we want to see done, and I think there's broad agreement in a lot of areas, and even the Liberal coalition will talk about the same sorts of things, but they pretend that they've actually been doing something productive on those issues for the last 9 years, when the reality is not the case. But broadly, when people talk about what do we need to see action on, you get a lot of agreement. The thing that we think is fundamental is that we need to redress the gaps in our accountability and integrity infrastructure in federal parliament. So federal parliament's the only jurisdiction in Australia that doesn't have an integrity commission. Every other one has them. So every state government has an integrity commission, an independent commission against corruption type of body. Yes. The New South Wales one is the most highly regarded in terms of the way in which it's run, the strength of its purview, the way in which it operates, and that kind of thing. And then the other states sort of fall away a little bit, but at least everyone has one. The federal government doesn't. And we've seen, I think, over the last 9 years, the way in which that allows a level of behaviour to go on in the federal government that, really we sort of look at and go, well, that's not okay. It's behind our inability to act on things like climate change, or act on things like aged care reform, or act on any kind of tax reform, because in the background you've got these interests who are pouring money through donations into politics, where politicians themselves know they're not going to be held to account because the media is kind of cheerleading for them. And so they behave in ways that are counter to the national interest. They're very much acting in their own personal political interest, and they're not acting in the interests of you and I or the broader community. So we believe that the introduction of the Federal Integrity Commission is critical, that needs to happen as a matter of priority. We also think, though, that things like funding the National Audit Office properly, funding the Independent Parliamentary Entitlements Authority properly, funding the Information Commission properly, funding the Commonwealth Ombudsman properly, stopping the way staff appointments are made to the Administrative Appeals Tribunal, like this kind of, the stacking that's going on some of these boards and tribunals and commissions. The Fair Work Commission is another one that's been awfully stacked in a partisan way over the last 9 years. All of that needs to be dealt with in order for us to start to see real action on some of these other issues. So, matter of priority, that accountability piece needs to be dealt with. And there really are a number of planks to that, but accountability, integrity, and transparency, and it's there in our motto, keep the bastards honest, but it really is a fundamental thing that we have to turn around. We've been heading in a bad direction for a decade, and if we don't stop that slide, we're going to normalise behaviours of effectively public corruption, or corruption of our public service and our parliament, in a way that's difficult to recover from. And you see that in other countries around the world. So that's sort of number one. The rest of it can come from there, and at least we can be convinced and confident that the action that we're seeing and the decisions that we're seeing are the ones that are going to be in the benefit of the community.
Well, yes, we definitely want politicians that will help benefit the community, and it's definitely something we need. And also, as you mentioned,
like it's, I mean, it shouldn't be controversial. Like it shouldn't be an odd thing, and yet here we are with, the Australian Democrats keep a list on our website of rorts and scandals over the last 8 or 9 years, and it's pages and pages long, and it's just this government, it's just this term in government kind of thing, and it's billions of dollars of public money that's been misspent. It's dozens and dozens of jobs for the boys or girls, revolving doors between lobby groups and government departments and back again. The IPA keeps getting personnel appointed into Parliament, and then they go back to the IPA. Tim Wilson is a good example of that. He went from the IPA to the Human Rights Commission, which is one of the groups that the IPA want to see dissolved, but he was appointed as a commissioner, and then gets a cushy seat in Parliament. We've just got to stop that kind of stuff, or we're in a bad spiral.
Yes, yeah. There's definitely a lot of stuff that needs to be checked in Parliament. That's for sure. So, we'll move on to the next question, so I don't take up too much of your time. So, why should New South Wales vote number 1 for the Australian Democrats above the line?
No, you've got me. I'm just thinking.
That's all right.
It's a question that we get a lot, Christian, and I think the answer really depends on who you are and who you might otherwise put number one. But let me say this: it's almost certain that the Labor government, that Labor will form government in 4 weeks' time. That come May 23rd on Monday morning, it's going to be Anthony Albanese that's forming government, and it's going to be Penny Wong that's being sworn in as the leader of the Labor Party in the Senate, and therefore the leader of the Senate type of thing. What we've seen over the last 9 years, but I actually think it goes a little bit further than that. I don't think it's a Liberal Party thing only, although they've been terrible at it. But I think over the last 13 or 14 years, what we've seen is the role of the Senate be undermined by this sort of bloody-minded obstructionist attitude from the groups in opposition. I don't think that's being made much better by having the Greens hold as many seats as they do in the upper house. And you can see it from the success rate that they have with amendments to legislation. So the Australian Democrats remain the most successful minor party from a legislative point of view when you look at our ability to negotiate successful amendments to legislation through the upper house of Parliament. The Greens don't even come close. Even with their 9 senators at the moment, they just don't come close in terms of their ability to negotiate an amendment. Because they don't really try to negotiate those amendments. They stand up, they introduce them, they get shot down because they haven't worked with anybody to prepare the ground to make sure that there's any kind of agreement. They ambush them in the Senate without any, they sort of introduce these amendments without any kind of preamble, catch everybody off guard, and then walk out of the chamber and hold a press conference and basically go, see, like no one will work for us. We're the only ones standing up for insert whatever the issue might be. It's not a productive way to run the Senate. So if you want to see people in the Senate who will be a productive force, who will be a constructive force in the Senate working with Labor to ensure that every piece of legislation that goes through the Senate is as good as it can be, then a vote for the Australian Democrats is a vote for that kind of constructive Senate. You're not going to see that kind of constructive relationship from the Liberal National Coalition. We saw it under Tony Abbott as opposition leader in 2010 through 2013, where they would just say no to stuff. That was all they would do. It's just like, no, 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 no for years. There was no effort or no attempt to work things through, to sit down at the table, to negotiate, to compromise, to improve. The Australian Democrats, that is what we do. Collaboration and a collaborative approach to legislation and regulation and policy is why the party exists. We are the only party, minor party or major party, who has a solid history of sitting down and bringing the major parties together so that we get solid legislation that is broadly beneficial to the Australian people. We haven't seen it in the last 14 years, and I think the lack of the Australian Democrats in the Senate is a good reason for that. So it's not, for me, the reason you vote for the Australian Democrats has less to do with the specifics of our policy and more to do with the way in which we go about negotiating legislation, working with the other parties to reach a view that makes the particular policy and the particular piece of legislation absolutely as good as it can be.
Well, yes. So we're talking about the whole Senate ticket with the big long white piece of paper for people who are not sure what we're talking about. So there's above the line, which is what we were just talking about, but there's also below the line, which is individual names. Do you have any
75
suggestion?
names below the line.
Yes.
Yeah, we've got 75 candidates in New South Wales this year. Do I have suggestions? I don't have suggestions for individuals, I have to say. I'm not familiar with the 5 independent candidates. I think there are a total of 10 candidates on the ballot who are not affiliated with a party. I'd need to check the details. So there are 22 parties on the ballot. There's one group of unendorsed candidates, but they're a group, so they'll appear in column D, I think it might be. Column. Anyway, they'll appear on the paper as this sort of unendorsed group of independents, and then you've got a group of independents who just appear below the line. I don't really. When I look through the list, there are some people that are apparently serving in Parliament that I've never heard of, because the major parties just treat them as seat warmers and a vote every now and again. They don't really do very much. And then you've got people who we are familiar with, like Christina Kennelly, who's heading out to look for a seat in the lower house. And the people coming behind are very well known. The person that I'm like, who's a candidate who's a current senator from the Liberal National Party, which is Jim Molan, is probably one of the people that I'm most looking forward to seeing knocked off the ballot. He's one of the current 3 Liberal National senators, and like we have an eye on that seat. But I don't really have a view sort of looking below the line, outside of the Australian Democrats. I don't really have a view for who stands out. I haven't had a chance to really go through that list of candidates just yet.
Yes, well, when focusing, because you guys in the New South Wales ticket, you guys are Group K. So
yes.
Do you recommend people just worry about above the line, so putting one on Australian Democrats, or you're not really fussed on worrying about below the line results?
Look, our approach to voting in the Senate is to vote for the parties rather than people. That's sort of what we recommend. We will be going through an exercise of, like, over the next few weeks as a party at looking at all 75 candidates in New South Wales and attempting to order them, like from best through to worst type of thing. I think ultimately, though, that won't differ very much from an ordering of the parties, from most aligned to least aligned. And in New South Wales, even that's a little odd. It sort of falls away fairly quickly in terms of, like what's sensible. There are some sort of single issue parties that are standing, groups like the Federal ICAC Now, who've got 2 senators up for election. I don't know how they will go in terms of voting, but like we sort of sit there and go, yeah, look, that's a great policy. We absolutely support it. Taking up a Senate seat with a single issue, I think, is a waste. I really do think our senators need to have a broader purview than that. And then we've got other groups like the, Informed Medical Options Senate ticket, which is effectively an anti-vax, anti-mask mandate. Again, it's a single issue group on
yes,
a different end of the spectrum, right?
Who is on the #1 ticket, is actually the next guest star.
Excellent.
Yes,
okay.
So yes, he will be coming on. So in the next episode, he'll be the guest. So that's
Awesome.
something to look out for if anyone's interested in that episode.
That's good. It's good. We haven't, and we don't really sort of set preferences, do preference deals, do that kind of stuff. We encourage voters to look at the records of everybody, look at their policy positions on the issues that are important to you, and we need to approach it from the perspective of what's a full spread of policies, and then the average voter will have particular things that they would like to prioritise, and they may make a different, ordering, and almost certainly would make a different ordering of their preferences based on their own sort of policy priorities.
Well, yes, yeah. It's all good information. I can't deny it. So how is campaigning for the current election going for you guys?
So it's going well for us. We're focused on getting people out for pre-polling and election day. For a party like ours, those are the most important activities. Running for the Senate is an interesting thing in itself because almost nobody is interested in the Senate race. All of the talk is either around specific seats or two-party preferred. Is it going to be a Liberal or a Labor government? Like that's pretty much where all the interest is. You don't even see the high-profile senators out there campaigning, and if you do, they're campaigning with a lower house candidate, lending their weight to help that person's campaign. They're not out there. Marise Payne isn't out there going, "You should re-elect me in the Senate." She's just the #1 Senate person for the Liberal National ticket in New South Wales and fully expects to get re-elected. But she's not actually campaigning for it. I'm not sure where she's been recently. It wasn't the Solomon Islands.
Yes, Marise Payne actually she was at Penrith today for the Anzac Day memorial. Yes, because that's only about a 15-minute drive from my house. So I know she was around me in my area today, the seat of Lindsay, I should say, which is my seat.
Yep.
But yeah, so that's where she's been. Yep. Anyway, continue. I just thought I'd let you know.
I mean, I guess the thing is, there's not a lot of interest in the Senate when it comes to campaigning. So as a party that's mostly running for Senate seats around the country, it's difficult for us to get any kind of traction in terms of, let's look at the Senate race in New South Wales and see how that's shaping up. There's almost none of that, and probably won't be until the day of the election, maybe a couple of days before, maybe a couple of days afterwards. There'll be some interest in, well, how's the Senate result? So campaigning for the Senate becomes this sort of odd thing. You need to campaign across the state, so we use a lot of social media. We are, doing activities like this one where we're talking to as many other groups as we can, just to get that awareness out there that the Australian Democrats are running. Remind people of the history of the Australian Democrats and our legacy and history in the Senate, and see if we can get as many people as possible to take us as a serious option for that sort of 1 or 2 or maybe 3 spot on their Senate ticket.
Well, yes, the Australian government has a history of, as you said, like Marise Payne, she's not really out there campaigning because usually the top 2 for either Labor and Liberal are usually guaranteed to get in.
That's right. Yeah,
it's always been the way it is, and that's usually it probably will be like that for the rest of the Australian government life. It's just how the world works unless someone changes it. But yes, that's generally how it works. So they don't really need to campaign. They've pretty much guaranteed spots. And
yet they're not out there advocating for what good they would do with that 3rd spot or a 4th spot. I mean, they've put up 5, 6 candidates apiece, but they don't expect to get more than just a few seats, and they don't bother to really campaign for them, which is, I think it does a disservice to the Senate, that essentially you're looking for some seat fillers, just depending on how the vote goes on the day. And really all the attention and focus is on the lower house. It's not like the lower house is, you're a teacher, Christian, so you'll understand this analogy, but the lower house is essentially your first draft. It's not your final work. It's not the work you hand in. You hand it into the Senate, and that's where it gets edited, rewritten, redrafted, refined, improved. It's where you take a little bit and go, like, let's expand that out because I think there's some real benefit there. Let's get rid of this bit because it's going to hurt more people than it helps, like this kind of thing. But it's where the quality is really assured. And the idea that the major parties have basically got a small handful of senators doing good work and then the rest of them just turning up to vote occasionally really gets under my skin, I have to say. Like, it really just bugs me when they're being paid, I don't know, $200,000 a year plus super, plus benefits, plus perks and the rest of it. I want to see people working much harder for us than they seem to want to.
Well, yes, it's definitely a good thought you've just put in. That yes, everyone, no matter how old, well, pretty much every Australian deep down cares about who is running the country, what they're going to do for us, no matter how big or small.
Yeah, and if they don't, it's because they've been convinced that it doesn't matter. That it doesn't really matter who's in Parliament because like no one really cares about me anyway. I honestly say to hell with that. Let's make sure that we've got people in there who will actually give a damn, who will work hard, who will show up each and every day and make sure that let's earn our money. Let's absolutely earn our money here. Let's do our research. Let's talk to people. Let's make sure we understand the impact of decisions that are being made. Let's make sure we've looked at it from every angle that we can possibly. Have we looked at the alternatives to ensure that the best thing is the thing that's going to best thing that's going to go out there, whether it's a piece of legislation or policy or a position on foreign affairs, like whatever decision it is that we're making, let's work really, really hard to make sure that it's going to be the best thing. You've got people sitting on the crossbench at the moment from places like, One Nation, who really don't care, who barely showed up last year, showed up for protest march about the mask mandate, but couldn't show up to actually sit in Parliament for most of the year. I just think that's awful. I really do. I think we deserve better than that. And this is the frustration I was talking about earlier. It's why I sort of came, off the bench, if you like, and said, what can I do? What can I do to help make this better?
Yes, I get where you're coming from for sure. So if anyone listening is keen to help out you and the Australian Democrats, how would they go to volunteer?
So if you go to our website, democrats.org.au, there is a big button there that you can press that says help. I should actually check exactly what it says, but it's along those lines. Join, donate, those sorts of big buttons right in the middle. You'll see a nice photo of me there if you go and visit. But yeah, like those options are right there on the homepage. We'd love for people to come and help. We recognise that we're not always people's first choice when it comes to voting, but we're often people's second choice. And I also suspect that in this election, there will be a lot of people from the Liberal side of politics who will look at the Liberal Party and what they clearly stand for and go, I think I need a different option. I think on the Labor Party side of things, I don't expect a single Labor Party person with any kind of room in their heart for the Labor Party to do anything other than put a big one next to them. But I think we make a great second choice for those people because I think we make for a better Senate. I think we make for a more constructive and productive Senate when we're there. And I think ultimately that helps all of us.
Yes. So if you're happy to help out, I'm sure Steve is happy to get volunteers on board. So
We would
yes,
love you to come and help.
yes. So who would the Australian Democrats prefer formed a majority Senate? So if Labor formed, it would be Penny Wrong being the leader, and if Liberal formed, it would be Simon Birmingham. So who would the Australian Democrats prefer got majority? Like, who would you guys work with better, you think?
So we'll obviously work with whoever forms government. So let's be clear on that. I mean, that is our aim, to be a constructive partner to the government of the day, and always has been. I think what we've seen though over the last 9 years is the coalition government are quite willing to trample on the conventions of the Senate, to ignore the processes of the Senate. We've seen a number of pieces of legislation in the last 6 months even pushed through the Senate without committee hearings, without public consultation, without even the time to really review the legislation and discuss it. They've just pushed it through, and they've pushed it through with the support of some of those crossbench parties that I've been talking about, like One Nation, where they basically sell their vote for that on something else. But as a result, we've seen some legislation go through that was really, really questionable. Now, that doesn't sound like a group that we can work with as productively and as constructively as we had seen in the past, or what we expect to see should the Labor Party form the majority in the lower house and form government. I don't expect them to have a majority in the upper house, no matter how well the election goes for them. They are going to have to work with the crossbench in particular. The Greens have already started listing their demands. The election hasn't even been held yet, and the Greens are listing their demands of what they want in return for working, in the Senate. I don't think that's a productive way to go about things, but that's the way they do their politics. So the short answer to your question is, I think we'll have a more constructive relationship with Labor than we will with a Liberal National Coalition, and we'll work with whoever ends up in government, as we have done for 45 years.
Well, yes, that's a really good answer. Yes. So whoever does form majority, you definitely would have to kind of, listen to them, and, but you still get to put your ideas in front of them.
That's right.
Try. And so, say, for example, if you guys decide to, tell the majority Liberal Senate, if they win, you want a federal ICAC, like, they might say no, but you guys will still try your best and presumably join up with other parties who want a federal ICAC to help.
That's exactly right.
Yes.
That's exactly right. I think we will see a federal ICAC this term. I think we'll see it quickly. The Liberal Party are almost certainly not going to form government this time around unless they, they may win enough seats to form a minority government if a number of independents come on board and say that they will support them. But those independents are almost certain to insist on an integrity commission, and they're insisting on Helen Haynes' version of an integrity commission, not the Liberal Party's one. So I think it'll happen no matter what. We want to make sure that when it does come through, as I was saying earlier, it's not just the integrity commission that we need to see. We need to see the funding and the staffing independence for those other scrutiny bodies to ensure that the ICAC can do its job, but also so that those other groups are properly funded to do theirs as well.
So do you have any other comments you would like to address?
I would like to just impress upon people that I firmly believe that this is the most important election that we've had in this country in 50 years. I don't say that lightly, and I don't say that glibly, but whoever you vote for this time around, I really want you to think about the kind of country that you want to have, and think of that first and foremost. There's a lot of conversation going along the lines of but how will we pay for it, and how will we pay for that, and what's it going to cost, and what do we have to cut if we do that? We can't do these other things. Almost all of that's bullshit, to be honest. We can and will find the money to do pretty much anything that we choose to, if as a society we decide that we want it. We don't struggle to find money for our armed forces. We don't struggle to find money for tax cuts for the rich or for corporate welfare. And yet to spend a few $billion on improving aged care so that people in aged care get a decent meal, we suddenly go through this disingenuous argument of, like, what are we going to have to cut in order to, make sure that our aged care residents are fed properly? Are you going to cut funding for youth suicide? Are you going to cut funding for homeless? And we never talk about cutting funding for fossil fuel subsidies or the various forms of corporate welfare, or cutting out defence spending, or that kind of stuff. So, like, it really is a crap argument to sit there and go, like, how are we going to pay for it? The first thing that I would suggest everybody think about when somebody says, we want to see, free childcare or free tertiary education, or we want to reduce the cost of whatever it might be. We want to improve the quality of our healthcare services in regional Australia. The first question you should ask yourself is that something that I want? Is that something that I want to see? Do I want to be able to drive through outback Australia and still be able to call people if I'm in trouble? Do I still want my phone to work no matter where I am in Australia? Yes, actually, I would like that. Well, okay, well then let's invest in our telecommunications infrastructure so that we have the infrastructure in place to allow that to happen. Do I want to live in a world in 50 years' time? And do I want my kids to live in a world in 50 years' time that's not burning every season, that's not, racked by drought, floods, hailstorms, cyclones, this kind of thing on a almost weekly basis? Yeah, I would like to see some action so that kind of stuff doesn't keep getting worse and worse. All right, well then let's find the money to improve our electricity grid, to build out our renewable energy supply, to stop putting coal and gas onto ships and sending them overseas for India and China to burn. And let's start building windmills and solar and battery storage in Australia. So, like, it's the discussion we have is the wrong one almost always, where the first question is, well, what's it going to cost and how are we going to pay for it? The first question I just want everyone to ask is that a reasonable thing that we want to see? I was talking to someone today and I said, in a country like Australia, in a rich country like Australia, I don't think anyone should be living in poverty. And they went, oh yeah, but what would it cost to do that? I said, well, can we just agree that Australia is a rich country? Yes. Can we agree that in a rich country, we shouldn't have people living on the streets? We shouldn't have people who can't get a decent meal. We shouldn't have parents who have to choose between whether they buy their kids food or medication. Like that, that those are things that we don't want to see in Australia, and that a parent should be able to do both of those things. They should be able to put a roof over their kid's head, feed them, clothe them, and get their medicine, rather than having to choose on a weekly basis which of those things they can afford. Like that's in a country like Australia, which really is a rich country, that those sorts of things shouldn't be happening. Let's agree with that. And take it from there. So as you go into this election, have a think about which of the parties that you're talking to, which are the candidates that you're hearing from, give you confidence that they can actually deliver a vision for Australia that aligns with your vision of what you want this country to be. We've spent 9 years with this really insular, mean-spirited, petty-minded government that has just eroded so much of our sense of selves and our standing in the world, but also how we view ourselves and our quality of life. I've had enough of it. I hope sort of more people think that way. And then I have hope that a new government gets formed that has a good working relationship with the crossbench in both houses of Parliament, so that we can start getting on a better track. But this really is a critical election. We can't afford 3 more years of the crap that we've gone through for the last 9. We really can't. And every election we allow it to continue reinforces and entrenches the view that corruption's okay, that's lying, that corruption is okay, that lying is okay, that a lack of transparency is okay, that pork barreling is okay, that looking after your mates instead of your community is okay. Like we really need to put that behind us and move on to a style of government and a style of politics that's much more honest, much more open, has a lot more integrity than what we've seen in the last decade.
Well, yes. Well, as I've said on my Facebook page, that I'm not sure if you've seen this post, but I put that I am happy to interview people of politics no matter what side they're on the political compass. So when I interview people, there obviously will be people that I agree with and disagree with. But yes, today I agree with you on many policies that you have listed. But so yes, I also wish you good luck as well.
Thanks very much, Christian. It's been a pleasure to have the opportunity to come and talk with you and to your listeners.
Yes, so to the listeners, you can follow his party on Facebook at Australian Democrats, and also the same on Instagram at Australian Democrats. You can follow me on Facebook at Christian's Political Talks, and the same on Instagram at Christian's Political Talks. Special thanks to everyone who tuned in to listen to today's episode, and I hope to see you guys soon. Bye.